Hi, Princess. Hey, Miss Shirley, how are you? Hey, Vincey Lou Who. How's everybody doing? I'll be doing all right. Got your hot flash kits? You gonna need it. You gonna need it. I'm bulleted up and ready to go. Figure out where the glare is coming from. Which Lord, the prologues ain't got it starts sexy off right from page 1, y'all. So get ready. Are we ready? Y'all ready for this? Well, you're more than welcome, Ray. How are you? I figured it out. I figured it out. How are you doing? Are you in? You said aloha. Are you on out there in Hawaii right now? Cuz New York don't go aloha. I was just telling the girls we got to get our hot flash kits ready, and I got mine. Y'all ready? See, it's fired up and ready to go. From Utah to Utah from Nevada or Nevada. By the way, Ori is Nina, if you don't remember. Got a good show up so far tonight. Salt Lake City. I've heard that's a beautiful area, but I've never been out there. Flew to Spokane, Washington when I was a baby, but I don't remember any of it. How is everybody doing? All right, who's getting some of this nasty weather right now? It was, my weather ain't pretty. I mean, well, it was kind of to look outside, it was okay, but to it was nothing to brag about um today. But when I listened to everybody else's weather around the nation, mine was pretty good. A friend of mine lives up in on outside of Ontario, Canada, and she said that it was minus 14 degrees Celsius, which I looked up. Hey, Miss Victoria. And hey, Sherry, welcome back, sister. She said that when I googled the Celsius to Fahrenheit, that was what did I tell you, Vincy? 6.8 degrees Fahrenheit, and they were in the process of getting a snowstorm. Oh, Victoria. Well, you made it. That's good. A lot of people have trouble getting on. I don't know why YouTube can't be easier. All right, Sherry, Victoria, did you bring your hot flash kits? You know you're gonna need it tonight. I brought mine. Yes, it's working. See? Good going, Victoria. Sherry, you thought we were kidding last night, didn't you, when I said that? The only thing I forgot was to bring me something to drink. Huh. I don't have anything around here, so y'all may have to listen to me croaking by the end of the night. One more minute, we'll be ready to get started. Let's make sure everybody's got time to get on here. Purple is a beautiful color, and I got a drawer full of purple and pink and black. Yeah, I have a feeling Nina's been charging all of her toys up all day. She has been ready and raring to go for this one. All right, y'all, let's get this party going. This story is called Allison in Wonderland. Not Alice in Wonderland, but Allison in Wonderland. And it's by Ray Sostre. Sostre. I love his cover. It's so pretty. Sostre. Okay. So. Oh my goodness. Alrighty. So let's get this party started. And I happen to like Sostre. Okay. And I happen to like my men bald around both heads. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Prologue. There on a by the way, I get to play with a lot of my fun voices tonight, y'all. So get ready. I'm excited. Prologue. There on a plush bench, the color of ripe cherries, sat a nude, middle-aged woman. I'm nude. I can be nude, and I'm middle-aged. And I can wear a wig. Her dark red hair cascaded down her back as she brushed it vigorously while eyeing herself in the large vanity mirror. On the counter nearby was a gold crown encrusted. Wait a minute, I got my crown somewhere. I knew I was forgetting something. There's my crown. Put my crown on. Because I am the queen. I'm the queen of hearts tonight, y'all. So deal with it. There we go. On the counter nearby was a gold crown encrusted with shimmering heart-shaped rubies. The Red Queen. She set down her brush and waited patiently as one of her maids approached with several items of clothing in varying shades of red over her arm. Here are your garments, your majesty, said the female servant. She too had red hair, but was much younger. Thank you, the Red Queen replied after taking the garments from her. She then waved her hand, motioning for her young servant to leave. The servant walked away and left the queen alone to dress. She laid her garments on the counter next to her crown, then turned the dresser in the corner and took out a pair of black silk stockings embossed with red hearts. She loved the feel of the silk as it slid up her thighs. She then took her corset from the drawer. The corset was bright red with dark red hearts making a pattern throughout. She slipped it on and cinched it until it was snug, enhancing her already bountiful bust. The queen then stood up and studied herself in the mirror. She studied the heart-shaped patch of pubic hair above her pussy lips. Her favorite maid had done a good job. Her servants knew better than to displease her. She was feared, and everyone knew she had the power to make heads roll. She stood there for another minute, admiring her beauty. The rest of her pussy was bare, and she loved touching its smoothness. The perfectly groomed patch of red curls was a beautiful contrast to her creamy skin. The Red Queen turned away from the mirror and continued to get dressed. The queen then slipped into black lingerie with a distinct heart pattern on it. She attached her silk stockings to the garter belts. Looking in the mirror, she turned and preened. Her look was nothing short of seductive. If only she owned a looking glass that complimented her like a best friend would. But she knew she was beautiful. The Red Queen picked up her crimson lace choker with the red heart pendant that hung just above her cleavage and put it on. She looked at herself as she moved her hands over her shapely ass, then along the sides of her curves. I have a shapely ass too. She was almost ready to leave, but she needed to put on one more thing: her crown. She could not leave her sitting room or go anywhere around her kingdom without her crown firmly on her head. She wanted people to know that she was their ruler. Her seductive appearance made sure everyone noticed her. The crown reminded them to obey her every word. She didn't want any competition. No one dared to be attractive, or she would eliminate them. Told you, Vincy. She considered putting on the thong that sat on the bench, then decided against it, as she had plans that didn't require underwear. Prisoners always excited her, but this one was special. She was excited to meet him and could feel herself becoming wet. She left her room and stood between her personal guards. The guards were also dressed in red. Each of them had a different number on their chest. When the Red Queen stepped out of her quarters, the men straightened their posture and saluted, their spears held in an arch formation. In front of her stood a man with long, dark hair and a sinister expression. He was dressed in a dark chest plate embossed with hearts. Underneath his chest plate, he wore a scarlet, long-sleeved knit shirt, black tunic pants, and black boots that had scarlet hearts along the sides. He wore a red cape, and his posture indicated his superiority over the other men. Lord Knave, the Red Queen addressed the man. I trust that our prisoner is ready. Lord Knave quickly bowed before her. Yes, your majesty. Our maidens have taken good care of him, drugging him with a potion that will have him ready for your visit. Very well. She turned to her personal guards. Lord Knave and I shall walk alone. Lord Knave held out his arm, escorting her down the hall. I must say, I'm very excited about meeting Sir Rook. He is the number 2 to the White Queen, and once I get rid of him and the White Queen herself, all of our kingdom will be ours. Anything you desire, your majesty, you shall have. I'm very proud that my men captured that white knight in shining armor. We had to sedate him, so he won't resist you, and thanks to our new sorceress, Kara, he will be ready and more than willing. In what way? The Red Queen asked. Nothing compared to what you'll be doing to him. You will finally get your white knight to submit to you. Very well. Our new sorceress seems to be working out. What with the potion for the white knight and her ability to determine the power of our hired assassin, Sasha. The power of the succubus has let me left me exuberant. You and I can finally drain the life's blood of our enemies. Sasha was a threat to our kingdom. With such great power and willingness to assassinate the White Queen, it was only a matter of time before she turned on us. Lord Knave said heavily, It's too bad I had to witness you give yourself to the enemy. The Red Queen turned to Lord Knave and placed her hand on the side of his face. Don't you worry, my love. My heart still belongs to you. Besides, I let you have your way with your female prisoners. We're doing this together as a way to strengthen our love and our kingdom. Lord Knave nodded. Fair enough. I do enjoy my prisoners, especially the killing, but they're not as pretty as you are when we make love. Lord Knave and the Red Queen faced each other in silence. They kissed, and it soon morphed into something lustful. The Queen felt Lord Knave's tongue swirl in her mouth and his large, calloused hands move over her ass. She felt an ache grow in her core, a sweet ache. If she didn't have plans to execute her prisoner, she would begin her morning with Lord Knave back in her quarters. She felt his hand move around to her front. His fingers grazed her mount. The Red Queen quickly stepped back to fan herself. When I'm done, I want to savor you in my room. The Queen then took another step back and grasped the door handle. Perhaps I could watch, just to make sure Sir Rook is finally dead and gone. And I would like to see you perform. With such a beautiful body, I want to watch you work your magic. The Queen's eyebrows rose, and she smiled. Very well. I'm amazed that I would arouse you while having sex with someone else. It's not just arousing, but more like a thrill to see you suck the life out of him once and for all. Then come, since you enjoy watching me. They entered the room together. On the bed was a muscular young man wearing only a pair of white boxers. Sir Rook. He was lying on the bed with his arms tied to the bedpost, ensuring there was no resistance. The young man was also blindfolded, so he could see what was going on. So he wouldn't see what was going on. The Red Queen signaled Lord Knave to stay as she sauntered over to her victim. The White Queen's knight is shining armor no more. She slowly climbed on the bed and laid her body on top of his. Don't you fear, Sir Rook. I won't hurt you. I would bet the White Queen has you do her dirty work and never rewards you for your effort. Does she? The young man didn't answer. Well, let me show you how I reward those with such valor. She straddled her body and lowered herself on top of him. The Red Queen turned to Lord Knave, who stood frozen by the door. He nodded and watched as she started playing with her prisoner. She began by licking the center of his chest. The Queen was intrigued by how nicely chiseled this young man was. He was no ordinary boy, but rather a grown man with no trace of hair on his body. She licked up until she reached one of his nipples, flicking her tongue around his areola sensuously. Next, she moved down and continued to look across his body towards his other nipple. The Red Queen flicked her tongue rapidly, causing her victim to squirm and groan. She moved her kisses down to his abdomen, leaving a wet trail. Suddenly, she grabbed his shaft. The young man was ready for her, hard and throbbing at her touch. It's a shame that she would have to kill him. Sir Rook was an impressive size, much bigger than Lord Knave. But she wouldn't say it aloud. She loved Lord Knave and didn't want to hurt him. The Red Queen moved down his body and got up on her knees, ass in the air. She stroked him and then, without his hesitation, took her prisoner's cock in her mouth, sucking from base to tip again and again. She heard his groans of pleasure and felt his involuntary movements. Sir Rook was enjoying what she was giving him. She paused for a moment to check Lord Knave's reaction. So far, no response, although she imagined he was turned on. She held the knight's length in her hand and continued stroking him. She gently squeezed his shaft, then leaned down to lick the tip where a bead of precum had formed. The queen worked his entire length into her mouth, keeping her ass arched in the air for Lord Knave, her pussy and ass on display. She hoped he was watching her move her ass. Her head bobbed rapidly, and the young man's groans grew louder and more guttural. She watched his head thrashing from side to side. His arms moved in reaction to the sheer pleasure she was giving him, but they were restrained against the bedpost. She let his cock slide out of her mouth once more and gave it a firm stroke. The Red Queen then flicked her tongue against his balls, smiling at his sharp intake of breath. She sucked his balls into her mouth one at a time while stroking him, enjoying his attempts to free himself from the restraints. She let go of his cock, letting it rest against his abdomen. The Red Queen then climbed over him and began rubbing her pussy lips over his cock. She relished in the wonderful feeling and loosened the top of her corset, allowing her breasts to fall free. Her nipples were hard, and in a way she wished she could set her prisoner free so she could feel his touch. Instead, she lifted herself and guided his big, hard cock inside of her. The queen let out a soft moan, moving herself up and down on his shaft. At the same time, she could hear her prisoner's sound of pleasure. She rolled her hips sensually and whispered, "How does it feel to be inside the queen? Feels good, doesn't it?" Sir Rook nodded but didn't say a word. She continued gyrating her hips as she turned to Lord Knave, whose only reaction was a cold stare. She rested her upper body on his and continued grinding her hips. Sir Rook's groans were growing louder. The Red Queen cupped her breast, held them over his lips, and demanded he suck them. Her tied victim stuck out his tongue and licked and nibbled and sucked on her breast. The queen's eyes fluttered closed and she exhaled on a low moan. She continued to grind on top of him, feeling how hard he was. Her prisoner was really hard, and at the same time, the Red Queen felt aroused, close to orgasm. But if she expressed her pleasure, she knew she would make her lover jealous. She couldn't let Lord Knave know she was enjoying her victim. She needed to make him come quick. She kissed the young man on the side of his face and whispered in a soft, husky voice, "I want you to come for me. Let me feel your true pleasure inside me. Show me how much you really enjoy me." Sir Rook's grunts and moans increased. The Red Queen raised herself and rocked her hips, her blood red nails raking down his torso, hoping to milk him of every drop. She knew the sensations rising in her body, and if he didn't come soon, she would. She couldn't let that happen. She felt his body tremble. Her victim let out a guttural sounds of pleasure as he bumped against her and came. She could feel him coming deep inside of her. It was time. She continued rocking her hips as her body convulsed violently. She pinned him down with her hands, but her young prisoner continued to buck, nearly shaking her off balance. Lord Knave intervened and pressed his hands to his chest, keeping him down on the mattress. Sir Rook screamed a horrific scream. The Red Queen could feel his life draining out of him and filling her body with his energy. She closed her eyes and tilted her head back, savoring the intoxicating sensation of someone else's life force entering her body. It was almost as good as an orgasm. Once finished, she looked down at her lifeless victim and smiled. That was close, my love. Lord Knave stood and shook his head. It's a good thing I was here. I know. He was so strong. He nearly knocked me off him, and then I wouldn't have been able to kill him. The Red Queen removed the blindfold from Sir Rook and peered into his glassy, lifeless eyes. Then, noticing how quickly his skin became gray just moments after his death, she bent down and whispered in his ear, Sir Rook, no, now no more. Love, may I ask, did you enjoy it? She gave Lord Knave an impish grin. Lord Knave smiled wickedly. Only seeing his life drain away once and for all, you know, we could have just beheaded him. Oh, wait a minute. Lord Knave smiled wickedly. Only seeing his life drain away once and for all, you know, we could have just beheaded him. I know, but he was so virile and youthful. I could feel his energy flowing into my body. Well, you wouldn't mind sharing a bit of that power with me, would you? I could sure use it to take on the White Queen's army as we prepare for a full invasion. The Red Queen placed her index finger on her lips and gave him a playful look. You'll have to kiss me. We can feed off each other. Lord Knave leaned in and kissed her. Their lips and tongues danced intimately as she gave him some of the strength. It was too bad she had to kill the White Knight. She had been so close to orgasm, which was a truth she would never tell Lord Knave. Chapter 1. Allison Woodward fumbled for her alarm, trying to turn it off. She stretched and smiled, realizing what day it was. It was Friday. Maybe tonight would be the night. Allison turned over, hoping to see her lover still lying there sleeping. She and Richard had been dating for a while. She was happy with their relationship. They had gone out last night for dinner and drinks, but once they got back to her house, Richard had been too tired for anything else. She had hoped their night would end with passion and possibly a proposal. But that didn't happen. Could he have cold feet when it came to proposing to her? She sat up, wondering where he could be. She called to him but got no response. She slipped out of bed and stretched again, revealing white lacy panties. Allison looked heavenly, wearing a light blue knit sweater, which was partially open, revealing the beauty underneath. Her angelic blonde hair highlighted her appearance. Even though she had gotten out of bed, Allison was beautiful. Even though she had just gotten out of bed, Allison was beautiful. She also had on a pair of blue and white striped thigh-high socks. She couldn't stand for her feet to be cold at night. The overall picture was stunning. She walked out of her bedroom and down the hall to the stairway. As she went down the steps, she heard something going on in the kitchen. Allison smelled the rich aroma of coffee. Richard had to be in the kitchen. Once down the stairs, she crossed through the living room and entered the open concept kitchen. There stood Richard in a blue shirt and black pants, looking sexy with his short blonde hair and crystal blue eyes. He was muscular under his clothes, and she itched for the opportunity to run her fingers over his bare chest since she didn't get the chance to last night. Allison wanted to seduce him and make him late for work, just this one time. Richard, Allison said as she sauntered into the kitchen. Going so soon? Richard was about to take a sip of his coffee when he noticed Allison in the kitchen. He quickly set it down. I do. I have to be at work soon. I should have brought a spare set of clothes. Allison took a step toward him and placed her hand on his chest. She kissed his lips, then inquired, "But you didn't bother to wake me for a quickie." Richard hesitated to answer. "I'm sorry, Allison. I was so tired last night and this morning, and I'm already running late. I'll make it up to you tonight, I promise." "I don't want to wait for tonight. We could do it right here, right now. The maids aren't due for another hour." "I can't. I don't have enough time. My father is expecting me at his firm within the hour." Richard took a sip of coffee and washed his eyes and pouted. "Tell him you're going to be late, just this once," Richard protested. "Allison, I can't. We have a meeting with investors from Tokyo. Mr. Yashimoto is expected to arrive later today." "Please." Richard finished his coffee and set the cup on the counter. "I can't. I promise to make it up to you tonight." He kissed her on the lips and walked away. "I have to go. I still need to go home and change." Allison frowned. She wanted him right now to have him fuck her on the kitchen counter. Richard left the kitchen and walked past the living room. He placed his hand on the front doorknob but hesitated as he checked his pants pockets. "Oh shit, I forgot my keys." Allison saw an opportunity to make him give her what she wanted. She spied his keys and swiped them off the counter. "You mean these?" She gave Richard a playful grin and jingled the keys in his direction, then clasped them in her fist. Richard walked toward her, holding out his hand. "Give them to me." "I'll give you your keys, but you'll have to give me what I want first." Richard groaned softly. He turned away. He didn't have time for this. "Come on, Allison, give them to me. I'm running late." "Not until you take off your pants and fuck me on the sofa. Then I'll give you your keys." Richard looked back at her in disbelief. "Really?" Allison narrowed her eyes and nodded. "Yeah, really. Are you going to take off your pants or not?" She opened her sweater in front of Richard, exposing her breast. "Because I want to fuck right now, and you're not getting your keys until you give me what I want." Richard turned another step toward her with his hand outstretched. "Allison, you're making me late. Give me the keys." Allison stepped back. "No. You want them?" She slipped the keys inside her panties. "You're going to have to come and get them." Richard thought getting his keys from her would be easy, but when he stepped closer, she grabbed his belt buckle and started to undo his pants. Richard stepped back. He was done playing her games. "Allison, what the hell, man? Come on." "Nope. You have to give me what I want first." "You're not going to take no for an answer." Allison shook her head and gave him a wicked grin. "Nope. Now strip." "I swear you're going to make me late for work." "You're not leaving until I get what I want, and I've got all day." "Fuck it. I'll call in late. My partner will understand." Richard sighed as he undid his belt and then his pants. He slipped out of his shoes before his pants fell to his ankles. Richard stood there in a pair of black boxers and a dress shirt. Allison, on the other hand, had slipped out of her sweater and panties, wearing only her thigh-high socks. She kept the set of keys in her hand in case Richard tried to get wise. At least he was getting undressed. She watched him take off his shirt and drop it to the floor. Allison was intrigued by Richard's semi-hardness. He was an impressive size, even though he was not fully aroused. She took a step closer and placed her arms around him, leaning in to give him a kiss. The kiss began soft. Allison felt his hesitance, but once their mouths opened, Allison felt the tease of his tongue. His hands traced her curves, and she felt his hardness against her mouth. His erection pressed against her felt warm, arousing. She wanted him bad. Her kisses trailed down to his chest and then lower. Her kisses moved farther down until she was on her knees holding his shaft. Without hesitation, Allison took his cock in her mouth, moving her lips up and down. Richard groaned, his enjoyment evident. Her grip on his shaft was firm as her head bobbed up and down rapidly. She then took his cock out of her mouth and began licking the underside, flicking her tongue side to side. While cupping his balls, Allison felt Richard's fingers fist in her hair when she took him back into her mouth. The heat between them made her wet with need. Unable to stop, she reached under herself and began stroking, working her nub between her thumb and index finger. She loved being able to pleasure him and make him moan. Letting the rigid member slip out of her mouth, she looked up to see her lover mesmerized. Watching her finger herself, she grinned wickedly, then closed her eyes as intense pleasure took hold. He wanted to help her achieve her ultimate goal. Richard whispered, "Let me do that for you." Allison was hoping Richard would offer to help her. The way she worked herself, she was determined to come, even if it meant waking up Steve, her stepbrother, and her friend Marcia, who had stayed over for the night. She gave Richard a naughty look and purred when she stood up and kissed his lips. The kiss was passionate. Their tongues danced together wildly, and she felt Richard's hand move across her tummy and down to her pussy. She moaned when his fingers caressed her clean-shaven mound. She parted her legs a little to allow Richard's fingers to find her slit. She felt his fingers pressing inside her folds and let out a sensuous whimper. Then his fingers found her nub. Allison felt a delicious electricity growing in her body. She loved his touch and gave him complete control of her body. Richard leaned his lips against her ear, and whispered. The heat of his breath tantalized her. "Get on the sofa. Let me go down on you." Allison happily obliged and laid on her stomach, lifting her ass and pussy for him as Richard moved closer. She loved when he ate her from behind. His face was suddenly buried between her cheeks, his tongue teasing her clit. Richard, Richard sunk his fingers into her ass cheeks, flicking his tongue side to side against her nub. In response, she let out a loud moan of pleasure, loving the way his hands gripped her body like she was a delectable dish for him to savor. His hands moved from her ass cheeks to the sides of her curves. Allison's eyes fluttered closed. She tried to be as quiet as she could, but she couldn't help it. She had guests staying over. She wouldn't mind if her stepbrother woke up and caught them having sex. It was fun to torment him with something he couldn't have. Steve Robbins stretched before sitting up in bed. He turned to his side and saw the beautiful, serene view of the Los Angeles skyline from his window. Today was a beautiful day, and he was going to enjoy it. As long as he was alive to see another day in that beautiful LA skyline, it was going to be a good day. He set his feet on the floor and looked to his nightstand. Steve noticed his bag of weed was empty. He needed more, but first he needed to use the bathroom. He stood and walked to the door, turned the knob, and opened it. Stepping out into the hallway, he looked to see if the bathroom was occupied. He was glad to see nobody was in there yet. He could get his shower out of the way. Turning back to his room to get his stuff, he stopped and listened. What was that noise? What was going on downstairs? He looked over the railing and noticed something disturbing, yet amusing. Allison was on the sofa, lying on her stomach with her ass in the air, her fiancé Richard eating her out from behind. He stood there and watched as his stepsister was pleasured by her dipshit boyfriend. He tried not to let it bother him. Allison had her eyes closed. She was moaning while Richard licked her from behind. From Steve's point of view, it appeared that Richard was eating her ass. Steve muttered to himself, No surprise there. Richard is what he eats." Steve watched as Richard pulled away and turned her onto her back. Steve caught a glimpse of Allison's bare pussy before Richard covered her sex with his mouth. Damn, why couldn't that be him going down on Allison? In a way, it was making him really jealous. And for Allison to have sex in the living room where he could see, it was intentional. Too bad he didn't have his smartphone with him. Wouldn't it be great to film them having sex and then upload it to a porn site? Two could play that game. So far, Allison was playing it better and Steve was feeling the torment. Steve continued to watch in silence as Allison's moans increased. Her legs were parted wide and she faced Richard, probably making eye contact as he ate her out. Allison's hand reached for Richard's blonde hair. She ground her pussy against his face and threw her head back, uttering a moan that was louder than before. Richard's hand found one of her breasts and gave it a firm squeeze. Steve watched Richard move his mouth over her pussy, extending his tongue and flicking it against Allison's clit. Then Richard stood up and held his hardness in his hand. Steve noticed Richard's size. His girth made him cringe. Could Allison even enjoy herself once Richard was inside of her? Richard left trails of wet kisses along the side of her neck. Steve watched as Richard lifted Allison's leg over his shoulder and guided himself inside her. Steve felt an ache in his heart as he watched them kiss. Would you like to borrow mine? I mean, you're welcome to borrow it, Megan. The way Richard pushed himself inside her left Steve burning with anger. He wished it was him. He'd had feelings for Allison for a while, and the way Allison treated him was nothing short of cruel. He watched Richard's cock move in and out of her pussy, Allison gasping between their kisses. She broke away from his kisses and turned her head to the side as she allowed Richard to fuck her nice and deep. Allison kept her eyes closed. Her lips moved along with Richard's thrust. Richard's fingers found her clit and began rubbing. Allison's moans increased, filling the room with her loud feminine whimpers. Steve leaned over the railing and watched. As upset and jealous as he was, watching his stepsister fuck right in front of him was getting him hard. Steve's jealousy quickly turned to satisfaction. He knew something about Richard that Allison didn't. He was seeing another woman behind her back. Steve was an entertainment lawyer, and while having dinner with a client in Hollywood, he noticed Richard having dinner with another woman. Richard didn't know she was there, but Steve watched as he placed his hand over the other woman's hand and whispered in her ear, looking at her intimately. If Allison's intention was to get the best of him, Steve didn't have to worry. Allison didn't have a clue that Richard was seeing someone behind her back. He stood there and watched them fuck. When Allison raised herself up on her elbows, she obstructed Richard's view. She opened her eyes and turned her head. Steve and Allison made eye contact. Allison's expression was cold, but there was a hint of a smirk. Steve played along and waved at her, a shit-eating grin on his face. He wasn't going to give Allison the satisfaction of knowing that she got to him. She was ready to return the favor. Steve was ready to return the favor. He turned and noticed someone coming out of the spare bedroom. Allison's friend, Marcia. Marcia was a gorgeous woman with milk chocolate skin and long curly hair. She had on a white tank top and red plaid pajama pants that hugged her figure nicely. She appeared to be irritated at having her sleep disturbed. She'd be pissed when she knew why. She spoke with a British accent. Her voice sounded gruff. Steve, what is all that racket? Steve quickly rushed to silence her. He didn't want Marcia to disrupt what was going on downstairs. Shh. Then he whispered, not so loud. Well, what the hell is going on downstairs? She asked. Allison is having sex. Marcia's eyes widened. Allison? Yes, she and Richard are having sex downstairs. You've got to be quiet. Well, I want to see too. Only if you promise not to get excited. Marcia curled her lip downward. Fine, I promise. Steve quietly led her over to the open concept living room where they were able to view Richard fucking Allison. She was amazed by what she was seeing. Her best friend was being fucked by her fiance right in front of her. Marcia whispered, "Oh my God, she's really doing it with Richard on the sofa?" Then she stated the obvious. "My God, look at his cock. He's so big." It looks hot, doesn't it? Marcia was mesmerized by the view in front of her. Yeah, but what if she catches us? She isn't going to care. In fact, my stepsister likes being watched whenever she has sex. She does? Marcia looked back at him. Yeah. Steve saw an opportunity with Marcia. If Allison was going to play a dirty game, he could play the same game. Steve was going to make sure he got to her the way she managed to get to him. He moved behind Marcia, leaned in, and whispered in her ear, "Just stand there. She wants whoever watches her to feel turned on as well." The way he's fucking her, I'm beginning to feel that way. Me too. Steve placed a hand on each of her shoulders. The two stood there as Allison and Richard switched positions. Richard was sitting on the couch, holding Allison against him in reverse cowgirl position. During the move, his cock fell out of her, and Allison gently guided him back into her. Oh my, Richard's got a big cock. Watching him go in and out of her is making me wet. Steve slid his hands down her arms, then pressed himself against Marcia's ass. He was hard and wanting, desperately hoping for a moment to happen between them. Like what you see? Wait a minute, are you coming on to me? He was seducing her, and Marcia didn't protest. If he could get her to see things his way, he could have her in his room and be inside of her in no time. He was looking to get even with Allison. Why? You don't like it? Want me to stop? It's because I'm whispering, Charlie. I can't do an English accent, darling. But thank you. Marcia never replied, so he felt confident enough to slide his hands around each side of her curves and gently pull her to him. Steve pressed his cock against her ass. Marcia remained still, liking what he was doing to her. Then, out of the blue, Steve felt Marcia's hand on his shaft. Steve was confident about Marcia's arousal. He loved the way she was touching him. Her hand felt him through the fabric of his boxers, but Steve's hand went for the ultimate prize. He slid his hand inside her pajama pants and moved down until he cupped her pussy. Do you like what you see? Steve asked. Oh, yes. Steve was intrigued by how wet Marcia was. Steve was able to press his fingers inside her folds without any resistance. Steve whispered in her ear, "You're so wet." Uh-huh, Marcia replied, her voice oozing with seduction. How long has it been for you? A very long time, more than a year. Marcia gave Steve's balls a gentle squeeze. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Uh-huh, Marcia whispered and nodded. I bet you want to feel me inside of you in that position, don't you? Her seductive yes was barely audible. Why why don't you give me a kiss? Steve suggested. Marcia turned her head and without hesitation kissed him. Their kiss turned lustful when he felt her tongue slip inside his mouth. Steve continued to finger her and caress her body, hoping Allison would catch them in the act. He wanted her to see that two could play his game. Steve was going to stick it to her. Well, her friend Marcia, who was as horny as he was. Okay. Got a little bit more to go. PT, you crack me up. Allison's eyes were closed while she moved up and down on Richard's cock. She was so into being fucked. She didn't care if Steve was standing there watching or not. She was glad to get the best of him, or she thought, until she opened her eyes. Pure shock registered on her face, seeing Steve standing there with her friend. Marcia was making out with Steve, his hand down the front of her pajama bottoms. That bastard! How the hell did he manage to get into her pants, of all people? Better yet, how could she have forgotten Marcia was staying over? She thought Marcia had gone back to celibacy after breaking up with her boyfriend over a year ago. Now she was in the arms of her stepbrother, and Allison didn't like it one bit. Dana TMI. Distracted and furious, she stopped moaning and sat still for a moment. Richard became alarmed. Allison, is there something wrong? Allison did her best to hide how upset she was. No, honey, everything's fine. Allison gyrated and got back into the groove with Richard's thrust. She leaned back against Richard's chest, but watched as both Steve and Marcia walked away. Steve taunted her by waving goodbye. Steve led Marcia to his bedroom. Once they were inside, Steve closed the door, pinned her against the wall, and kissed her forcefully. He pressed his cock against her pussy, dry humping her. The anticipation of what was to come making him harder and her wetter. Marcia wrapped her arms around him and grabbed his ass, encouraging Steve to hump her harder. The sexual energy between them was palpable. Steve drove into her as if they were naked. Oh my gosh. Until right then, the name Steve didn't even connect with anybody else in my mind. Now, Vincey, the Vincey and Nina, the guy the day I was talking about I was arguing with online. Well, that's his name. Yeah, that's not an image I want in my head. Okay. The sexual energy between them was palpable. Steve drove into her as if they were naked. She clawed at him and begged him to fuck her. He broke away long enough to start pulling Marcia's pajama pants down. He got them down to her thighs when she pushed his hands away and finished taking them off. Steve slipped out of his boxers and his cock sprang to attention, anxiously waiting to be inside of her. Marcia palmed his shaft and they moved closer, kissing feverishly. All of a sudden, I can't talk. Marcia was naked from the waist down, giving Steve the opportunity to hold her leg up while pushing inside her waiting warmth. Marcia let out a deep moan when she felt him stretch her open. Steve could feel the intensity of being inside her. Marcia wasn't only wet, but tight, and Steve was feeling her with his length, moving himself in and out of her pussy. Once they managed to work out a rhythm, Steve had Marcia wrap her legs around him. He slammed into her with pure determination. Steve gazed into her contorted expression as she screamed in pleasure. Her moans were like music, passionate music, and Steve marveled at having Marcia riding his cock. Marcia felt good, really good. Steve squeezed Marcia's breast hard. He ravaged her mouth as she clawed his back with her sharp nails. He was going to have marks for days, but he didn't care. Marcia shouted with pleasure as she reached orgasm. He contemplated silencing her with a rough hand over her mouth, but her screams of pleasure had already escaped his room. Marcia continued to climax. Steve silenced her with hot kisses. Once her orgasm passed, Steve set her down on her feet. He looked at her hungry. He wasn't done yet. Get on the bed and turn around, Steve growled. Marcia purred when she climbed up on the bed. Oh, yes, my favorite position. Marcia got on the bed on all fours, showing him her pussy and ass. Steve grinned, loving the view of his delicious backside. He placed his hand on her ass. Give it to me, Marcia begged anxiously. Oh, I'll give it to you nice and deep, Steve remarked. Deliciously deep. Believe me, you'll feel every inch. Steve climbed up on the bed and situated himself behind her. He grabbed her ass cheeks and without hesitation rammed his cock into her pussy. Marcia squealed in delight as he continued to pound her. Steve savored the feeling of her warm juices. Marcia was wetter than ever. He placed his hand over her shoulder and picked up his thrust, causing her ass to slap against his hips. Steve looked down at his cock, watching the way it moved in and out of her. His skin was pale, and he couldn't help admiring the way his body contrasted against hers. And then he noticed her puckered hole. He was curious, dying to know what it would feel like to be inside her ass. If Marcia's pussy felt tight, her ass had to be tighter. Plus, her pussy was so wet, he didn't need any lube to get inside her. Oh my gosh. He pulled out of her and rubbed his cock between her ass cheeks and asked, "Would you mind if I—" "Please, but go slow. It's been a long time since Marcia hissed. I just had him picturing it was wet and lubed and he was just going to slam into her and I was clenching up. But I'm the first for some ass play, y'all. Steve pressed the tip of his cock inside her, and just as he had expected, Marcia was incredibly tight. He worked himself inside of her, enjoying the way she squirmed and hissed under his ministrations. He continued penetrating her nice and slow, but he wished he was fucking Allison in the ass nice and hard. Once he managed to push his entire length inside, Steve began moving his hips back and forth. "Rub yourself, Marcia. I love that shit." Marcia did as she was told. He savored the tightness of her ass, watching her place her hand under herself, rubbing her clit, another orgasm taking hold. He rocked her so hard that the bed was shaking. Marcia was reeling in pleasure. Steve not only enjoyed giving her more pleasure, he also enjoyed her tight ass. He hoped that special someone would be standing in his doorway, frowning at his enjoyment. His prayers were answered when he noticed Allison out of the corner of his eye. He turned and looked back at her. She had her arms folded over her chest. A look of disapproval contorted her features. In Steve's mind, he only wanted to pay her back for tormenting her. And to add to her torment, he slapped Marcia's ass just to hear her moan. "Oh, yes, keep slapping my ass. I love the feel of your cock in my ass." Allison raised her eyebrows. Steve returned a sinister grin and hoped Allison would stick around. But she stormed away, not saying a word to him. He gave one last thrust in Marcia's ass before pulling out. Steve rubbed the head of his now pinkish cock. It was time to give her his release. But first he needed to clean up. He had been very close to coming, but he wanted to come inside her pussy. He pushed himself back inside of her. His cock stretched the walls of her wet pussy. Then he leaned over and asked, "Marcia, can I ask a question?" "Uh-huh," Marcia responded quietly, limp from her last orgasm. "Are you on the pill?" "Yeah, why?" she asked, a little more alert. Steve let out a howl of pleasure as he pumped a load of cum inside of her. His orgasm was so intense he convulsed uncontrollably until he was spent. Steve's body covered in sweat, and he felt relaxed after that intense release. Marcia had felt good, but what he really hoped was that his tryst had Allison upset. It's not like he gave a shit if she didn't approve of him fucking her friend. "Did you just come inside of me?" Marcia asked in disbelief. "Yeah, why? You said you're on the pill, right?" "Yeah, but that doesn't mean you get to come inside of me. I was hoping you would come all over my ass and back. Hell, you could have come all over my tits and face." He got out of bed and bent down to pick up his pants. "Well, you didn't tell me that. I asked if you were on the pill, which you said. When you said yes, I figured it was okay to come in you." Marcia sat up quickly, feeling his cum leak out of her onto the bed. "Still, you could have actually asked me." "Okay." Steve bent down to pick up his boxers. "I'll remember to ask next time." "There won't be a next time, you fucking asshole." Marcia picked up her pajama pants and stormed out of his room. Steve felt bad for a moment about what he did, but he shrugged, thinking to himself that she'd get over it. For now, he was glad he had gotten even with Allison. He needed to take a shower and cool off. It was Friday, and he had a feeling today was going to be a good day. Now that's where I'm ending. What the hell are you guys talking about now? Yeah, Nina, TMI, we don't need to hear you come. Nina, why are you watching this on your phone? You got a computer and you got a tablet and you're watching on a little bitty phone? You crazy woman. What y'all think of the show? What y'all think of the story? It's pretty good, huh? And that was the prologue and chapter 1. And I don't have time to read any more, or I would. And just what were you doing while you were listening, Megan? Oh, I want to read the Snow White one. That's my favorite princess. I don't care about Cinderella. I don't want to read that PNS one either because I can't say that word. You know I have a hard time with that word. Ooh, I like BBWs too. Okay, I was just trying to catch up on everything. Woo, you guys went crazy. Oh. Miss Shirley, you just warmed my heart, dear. That is an awful accent. You should hear me when I really like. Those were short enough sentences I could kind of fumble through it, but like if I had to read like a lot with an accent, it's horrible. Nina, Nina, did you call my name when you came? Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Ray, for letting me read it. I appreciate it very much so. Now then, ladies and gents, do not be strangers. Come back. Do not be strangers. Okay, my next live read is going to be next Wednesday. And let's see what we got. Sometimes I have them on Sundays, so just check in the nook and see where the schedule's going to be. All right. Ooh, yeah. Next Wednesday is Michael James's February, which he's doing a 10 months of grandma's silent auction where she auctioned off her daughter to 10 different guys, her granddaughter to 10 different guys. Now I've got some voices in there that are pretty good too. So, and Michael James stuff's pretty sexy too. So I might get in there. And then Thursday is going to be, Thursday's a reverse harem. So, yeah, you guys might want to be there Thursday too. It's going to require hot flash kits. So, yeah, next week's hot flash kits. So, yes, you're going to have to come back. Alrighty, so I'm going to assume that you guys posted where everything's at, how much it is, and all that fun stuff. It's on KU, I know that much. So you guys come back next Wednesday, and I will read to you again. So I hope everybody had a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining me, and you guys, happy reading.